Welcome, everybody, to
Hi.
the Cosmopolitics and What the Hell Hot Takes Happy Hour. We have a lot of hot takes and a
Oh
lot of
my God.
spiciness going on. Danny, let's start with the cocktail.
Well, first of all, let's start with why I wanted a spicy cocktail for today. Can you all hear that I sound like I have the world's worst cold? I don't. I just had a little surgery on my nose.
On her doze.
On
It's
my nose.
something between dope and doge.
I'm really hoping that it's gone before Meet the Press tomorrow. But anyway, I thought a little jalapeno would help us out. So we've got a spicy hot takes margarita. It's
With a
easy peasy,
spicy
guys.
news going on.
Oh, you are not kidding. Oh my God. I cannot wait to talk about Elon and Trump. But wait, 1.5 ounces of tequila. That's just for one person, people. Half an ounce of orange liqueur. Use Cointreau or something like that. An ounce of lime juice. Dash of orange bitters and a half an ounce of simple syrup. Otherwise, it'll be a little bit bitter. Shake it all up. Toss in a little bit of jalapeno. Shake it all up. Like use branded your branded cocktail shaker and pour it in your glass. You can have a rim if you want. Elise doesn't like rims. I'm not much of a rim girl myself. And that's it.
If it's got a little tang, I just don't like just the plain salt.
Right. Cheers. You know what,
Cheers.
Elise? Before we talk about the unbelievable pissing match going on in the kindergarten now known as the White House, I want to talk about your piece that I really loved this week.
Thank you.
I thought it was really one of your best pieces. You talked about Ukraine being a Rorschach test for Donald Trump, and I thought just lay it out for everybody.
Yeah, I
Thank
mean,
you for the
look,
hearts.
if you remember coming back to even before the election and even towards the end of the first Trump administration, Trump had soured, wasn't enthusiastic about Ukraine, much more leaning into Russia, wanting that great relationship with Vladimir Putin. And, that was even kind of coming into the administration and before the election, he wanted Republicans not to support aid for Ukraine. And that was a very MAGA thing, right? Not only about Putin and his strongman himself, but you remember Tucker Carlson going to Russia and going to the grocery store and and just the idea that the U.S. really shouldn't be involved in Ukraine and, really leaning into the pro-Russia point of view. Now that President Trump, to his credit, is trying to, who knows if it'll be successful, negotiate an end to the war. And there's been a lot of, criticisms that he's been leaning too much into Putin's point of view, especially remember that horrible Oval Office meeting where neither him nor Zelensky really comported themselves well. Um, but he's starting to realize that, yeah, Vladimir Putin might be playing me a little bit. Maybe he's not the, best friend that I thought he was. And he's starting to get very frustrated and lose patience. But, and now, the Ukrainians had a pretty good weekend for a country that, is getting beat up, really daring attacks on Russia inside of Russia this weekend. And the MAGA crowd is really looking. Steve Bannon, in particular, was tweeting it up, saying that Trump has to come out harder against Ukraine. And what I said was, this is really a test for President Trump, whether he's going to lead MAGA or he's going to follow MAGA. President Trump does have some tendencies to, go for diplomacy, want to end the war with Ukraine, want to end the war in Gaza, India, Pakistan. The guy wants his Nobel Peace Prize, but, MAGA doesn't really want a real robust U.S. engagement in the world. And so I think Ukraine is the first real test where, those splits are there, and we'll have to see how it goes. But, I've always thought that in time, Trump might grow distant from the MAGA crowd and maybe more back to the original. Everyone laughs at me and they think I'm ridiculous, but I think that the more he leans into Marco Rubio and some of the others, Mike Waltz, for instance, I think it's possible that him and MAGA have other disagreements.
So I'll say a couple of things. First of all, I think that the way you framed it, which was fundamentally that the reality of the sort of
governing.
the geostrategic reality, meeting up with Trump's own ambitions and desire for a legacy is really an important moment, and it's going to be a test for him. So we refer to MAGA, and what we tend to do is we tend to talk about people who are really loud within the movement, right?
True.
We talk about the Steve Bannons, we talk about Tucker Carlson, we talk about Doug Jr., yada yada yada. People who are on Twitter all the time, Truth Social, whatever. The reality is, and I've mentioned this before, and Mark Thiessen and I mention it all the time, the Reagan Foundation does a poll once or twice a year on foreign policy. They divided it up last year between MAGA and non-MAGA Republicans on foreign policy. And what they found is that the people who self-identified as MAGA were more inclined to want to do something for Ukraine, to want to be engaged in the world than other people who didn't identify themselves. So I think all of these self-appointed loudmouth leaders who pretend that they know what Donald Trump thinks and that they are the better leaders of the movement actually don't understand what he's all about, because he's actually not what they think he is. Let's keep our fingers crossed. And B, the movement isn't actually what they pretend it is either. So let's hope that we don't need to be saved just by the bad actions of the bad guys. Let's hope that, in fact, the president is seeing the light about some of these things where he, wanted to give peace a chance and then realized, oh yeah, I forgot. Everybody sucks. Anyway, moving on, baby. Are we
Moving
going to
on
talk
to
about
another guy who sucks.
who's that?
I mean, everyone. Dany and I were going to talk about some things related to Gaza and Israel today, and I said, "Oh, here's a good article." Dany's like, "Don't care. Just watching this cat fight between Trump and Musk." And like in the last few hours, it's just kind of tanked.
What the hell is going
What
on?
the hell
She
is going
said.
on?
Right.
Um,
This is not cosmopolitics. This is what the hell. So I'll say this first of all. I think everybody who's on here, everybody who's going to listen to this is going to say the same thing. It was only a matter of
Matter
time.
of time.
Two ginormous egos, two men who too often behave in a childlike fashion, were bound to have this set to. But damn, has it spiraled out of control fast. Did you see what Trump accused? First of all, Musk accused Trump of not releasing the Epstein files because
Because
Trump
he's
was
in them. Which,
that.
you know what? I'm
I
not convinced he's not, but we
I
can move
don't
on.
care. I just don't give a damn about Epstein anymore. Let me be honest. Um, then Trump starts threatening Elon's contracts and says that the only reason he didn't like the big beautiful bill was because it cut
Wait,
money.
before we go on, you know what? This just goes to show about, kind of Trump's cult of personality. Can we stop calling it a big, beautiful bill? It's big. It's not so beautiful.
I hate to tell you, that's its name. HR 1, the Big Beautiful Bill Act.
It's preposterous. Let's
Well, yeah.
continue.
Yes, I agree with you. I think it's stupid. I'm pouring myself some more. Yes, I agree with you. It's stupid. Look, this is the problem with a lack of professionalism. I agree entirely that America and Washington has a deep state problem. I agree entirely that there are people in this town who think to themselves, I'll be here when you're gone. My job is forever. You're just the elected president. Yeah, I agree, and I'm pretty sympathetic to the idea that, for example, we needed a State Department reorg. That AID is not working the way it should be. When you bring someone like Elon Musk in to break all the furniture, to be the bull in a china shop from the outside, you end up risking exactly what Trump ended up risking, which is that a person who doesn't know anything about Washington, doesn't
Or
understand
government.
how
Yeah.
or doesn't understand how government works, doesn't understand how the budget works, doesn't understand the stakeholders, doesn't understand the Constitution and how Congress interacts with the executive branch, that he was A, going to get sick of it, take his toys and go home, and B, that all of a sudden he was going to be massively disillusioned with the idea that he was shocked to discover that Donald Trump is not a fiscal conservative. What? What? I can't believe it. He's a Democrat.
Well, and also just back to the unprofessionalism, just the unprofessional. And I've said this before with you. And had Trump come in the beginning and said, I really want to make government more efficient. The Department of Government Efficiency, not, you know, not a bad idea. Had he come in and said, you know what, let's do this on a bipartisan basis, let's do it professionally. Again, maybe that's naive, but had he done it in a way like when Bill Clinton came in all those years ago and said, I want to balance the budget. I'm just saying,
Did he
if
balance the budget there, Elise?
he had a pretty balanced budget.
Bullshit.
Anyway, we digress. But what I'm saying is, had he come in and done it as, a professional way and not just this chainsaw, wrestling, obnoxious,
Douchey,
offensive,
douchey behavior.
douchey behavior. Um, and look, but the thing is, now instead of, Elon left, and instead of trying to work with his best friend Donald Trump, went to what Elon Musk does best, is to be an agitator. And now the Republicans are having a very bad day on this
No,
because they
deservedly so. Look,
deservedly so. And they're Trump is going, Musk is going away and taking his billions of dollars that could have gone to their campaign coffers with him.
look,
Time
I
is a
think
bitch.
Elon Musk Elon Musk, George Soros, Charles Koch, all of these people are, for me, prima facie evidence that we need to do something about money in politics.
Yep.
But I will say the fact that he has woken up Congress and helped some of our more shy members find their cojones is not a bad thing.
I agree.
Because, there are things that offend me as a conservative in this bill. The idea that I in Virginia have to subsidize you in New York and your high state taxes by allowing you a larger deduction. Screw that. That was another compromise that was made for blue state Republicans. There's a whole series of other things in this bill, not to speak of spending, an increase in the deficit of more than $2
Well,
trillion.
to be fair, the tax cuts are also, pretty expensive.
Expensive.
At a
Yeah, I know,
right,
but I
they're
like
very
tax
expensive
cuts.
at a time. I love a good tax cut, but they're pretty expensive at a time where we're trying to cut spending
Well, again, you could
and
cut
the
spending
deficit and the
intelligently.
deficit.
The problem is that all of the things that Donald Trump is doing are all in diametric opposition. The games he's playing with tariffs are going to hurt the economy at a time when we need to grow the economy. Tax cuts are intended to grow the economy, but if the economy is shrinking, tax cuts don't do that job. Then you don't have the money to pay for them. There's a whole series of things in here that frankly deserved a lot more scrutiny. And, yes, we all know these bills are humongous. 9 times out of 10, nobody reads them. I have had a nightmare of a time with one provision I've been trying to figure out whether it was sent to the Senate or not, having to do with 501(c)(3s supporting terrorism, and it was in the bill, and now it's gone. And I was like, "How did we get out of that?" This is so, an average member of Congress has got a challenge here, but the right thing to do is to sit down and scrub it and agree on it. And if they can't do that and it has to be shoved through, you're gonna end up with the kind of shit sandwich that they've got right now.
But I mean, this whole idea with Trump and Musk, just to finish the point, and then you brought up 501(c)(3) is maybe a good time to move on to Columbia University,
It's always a good
um,
time to move on to
but
Columbia
who's gonna
University.
look, you know who's gonna win in this pissing match? Donald
No,
Trump is
no, no,
obviously
everybody
very
loses.
popular. Donald Trump is obviously very popular, more popular than Elon Musk with Republicans, but Musk has the bigger platform and more money,
Everybody loses. This is dumb.
including the American people.
No, I
Let's
mean,
move on.
we are the American people, and it doesn't serve us when our leaders behave like idiots.
Yep,
It just
doesn't.
doesn't. I didn't like it. I didn't like it. I didn't like seeing a senile man in the White House, and I don't like seeing a juvenile in the White House at 78 years old. And I certainly don't like it when he brings his juvenile friends and they play their juvenile games. It's not what we're paying him for,
Amen.
frankly.
Amen,
Amen.
sister.
Okay, baby. Columbia
Columbia
University.
University.
Columbia University. it's so hard for me to not feel that Columbia University deserves absolutely everything that it has gotten because it is such an I do like my tax cuts. Jacques Pentu. I like them very much. Thank you very much. I like to work hard and keep my money. But
Yes,
back to Colombia has become a cesspool of anti-Semitism, of America hatred, of Hamas love, of a place that just defines everything that's wrong with our academic culture right now. It really has been. Now, the question becomes, okay, did it do enough as required by law to protect its Jewish students? I think that there are a lot of people who would say it didn't.
it didn't.
Now, this is a very complex legal question because Title VI of the Civil Rights Act doesn't actually talk about religion. One of the really good executive orders from the first Trump term that was the only executive order that Joe Biden didn't rip up was the executive order that said that Title VI needed to be used to protect Jewish students who were victims of anti-Semitism, who were victims of religious discrimination. Okay, that's fine. I'll come back to the military budget, but that's fine. And I think that was a good thing. Why Congress has been incapable of enshrining that in law is a total mystery to me. Okay, so what has happened in the spiraling escalation of the Trump administration's fight with the Ivy League, with Harvard, and with others? There have been various agreements made. Columbia actually came to the table. They agreed to make certain changes. They agreed to make some more changes. They weren't totally honest about what they were going to do. But now what's happened is the Trump administration is threatening the Columbia's accreditation. On what basis is it making that threat? Because the accrediting organization requires that the school abide by and respect all laws. If Columbia was in violation of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, then in fact its accreditation should be in question. And now it's actually not the tempest that it appears to be, because what the Trump administration said, which wasn't unreasonable, was you need to work with your accrediting agency to take steps to mitigate the problem that you have in order that you are in compliance with the law. They
I
didn't
fully
say we want to take it away. They didn't
no,
say you're
I
dead to
fully
me.
look. I fully agree that Columbia needs to take more steps. I fully agree that Harvard needs to take more steps. My personal opinion, I know you'll disagree with me here.
But I still love you.
I still love you too, girl. But I just don't think this really has in Trump's mind. He can call it and we've talked about anti-Semitism. We both write about anti-Semitism. We've seen what's happened and what continues to happen. The attack in Colorado last week. I just don't think in Trump's mind it's about anti-Semitism. I think in his heart of hearts, this is a war on the elite, and he's picking them off one by one.
Again,
I think
uh,
let me finish the thought.
yeah, go
And I
ahead.
think we're going to talk about the travel ban, and I just think all of it is about using anti-Semitism and the pain of Jews for his own political vendettas, and it really makes me sick. I think it's gross.
Okay, I don't think that at all. Actually, I think
At
you
the
can
same time
criticize.
that he's
You could,
supporting a Polish candidate that's a Holocaust denier, I don't think anti-Semitism is like the sine qua non that we act like it is for him.
so I think the problem with Donald Trump is not the way you describe it. I think he is genuinely very hostile to anti-Semitism. I think he is genuinely concerned about it, and I know that because
Like
it.
he was in Charlottesville?
Hang on a minute, okay?
Okay.
Oh, I think he's genuinely concerned about it, but he has a blind spot, and his blind spot is on the right. I just finished writing this for somebody else, and you know that is a problem. We agree. I think you and I agree about this. I am not in any way sickened by his fight against anti Semitism. I just want it to be equal opportunity. I want him to fight more on both sides. I despise left wing anti Semitism. I think it's terrible. Harvard and Columbia and everyone else should be ashamed of themselves, as should AOC and Rashida Tlaib and all of those disgusting people in the Democratic Party. But I'm also disgusted by Tucker Carlson, by Joe Rogan, who's platformed people who he should not have, who are Holocaust deniers. The problem is not that Donald Trump is not honest about it. The problem is he has this blind spot. A lot of us have blind spots, but I don't see his fight against anti-Semitism, which I think has been a characteristic of his whole career, including most of his life when he was a Democrat. I think that he's been very solid on this issue. I don't question his motives. I question the equal opportunityness of it, and I would love to see him be better about anti-Semitism on the right. And this is really where we see the Poland problem, the Hungary problem, the Qatar problem. Honestly, they're not on the
Right,
right;
right,
they're just in the
right.
terrorist camp.
Yeah, yeah.
Anywho, you and I.
I'm gonna put it out on notes. There's a very good piece about this, about that you have to call it out equally on the left and the right, and the idea that anti-Semitism is,
Scarce.
has many faces, and many perpetuators, and by Michael Kozwalo, or I'm going to say his name wrong. I hope he's not listening.
Didn't
But
see it. I'll look for your note.
anyway, it's very good. So I'll put it. It's an excellent op-ed. So I'll put it out. Travel ban.
Oh yeah, God, I forgot all about that with the excitement of the fight with
Yeah. So
Elon.
that's not. It was wrapped up in anti-Semitism, but the country, the guy came from
Oh, Egypt.
Egypt, is not on the list. These are, in Trump's words, shithole countries, and he doesn't want people coming from there.
Well, he said that in his first term. That's true.
Well,
This
they
time,
happen
I
to
don't
still
know.
be.
Did you read the executive order?
I did not.
I did. I
Okay,
read it
tell
when I
us.
got it. They went to a pretty good amount of trouble to connect the dots on the countries that they chose. In other words, they were not all shithole countries.
I don't. I mean, I don't think
Wait a
any
minute, wait
country.
a minute. There were a lot of countries where there was a record of those nationals overstaying their visas. There was a record of terrorism. Now, what is interesting about this list is not what's on the list, because I actually am reasonably comfortable with the list. What's interesting to me is what's not on the list. So it's okay to come from where? Egypt. This guy came from Egypt. It's okay to come from Pakistan.
Or
It's
Iran, or Libya,
no,
Somalia, Sudan, Yemen. Yeah,
Iran
I
is
know.
on his list. Iran is on his list. And again, look, I don't like the idea that we ban entire classes of people.
Right. Me
I
neither.
also don't like the idea that there are people in this country who think it's okay to go and firebomb a group of elderly people walking
Of
peacefully to
course, it's
call
not.
attention. And by the way, screw their family too. None of them should be here. They're all illegal aliens. This is our country, and we don't need people like that there. By the way, did you see the fellow who was arrested and charged from Dearborn, Michigan? I don't know of what. I think he's an American, or he's either an American or an immigrant, but I don't believe he's an illegal. He went to a gun store to buy a gun, and the felony background check flagged a felony, even though he lied on a lot of the background check. What was he there doing? He was buying a gun because he had been surveilling a Jewish kindergarten in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, not far from where he lived in Dearborn, because he wanted to shoot up all the children and parents who were arriving. I'm sorry. Two people were murdered in Washington, D.C. A whole group of Jews, including a Holocaust survivor, were firebombed. It is not, I wrote a piece on this. Oh, it's open season on Jews. It is not okay that this is happening in our
Well,
country.
and
It is
also,
not
I
okay.
just think, someone, we talked about this. We might have talked this about this last week, that,
I got cut
some
off last week.
well, someone posted on my thing that, like, this is tangential to the conflict, and it's not anti-Semitism. And I'm sorry, when you blame a whole class of people for a war that's going on thousands of miles away, yeah, that's discrimination and that's card-carrying anti-Semitism. So,
Yeah,
but
we
on
agree
the
on this.
travel ban, I didn't, I didn't agree with it when it happened then, and I don't agree with it when it happens now
I
because
didn't agree with it when it happened then. I'll be honest with you. I didn't
it
agree
was
with it when
I
it
mean, it's a
happened then.
Muslim ban. It's a class. It's just like you said. It's a class of discrimination. Look, are there a lot of Muslim extremists in Yemen? Yes. Do we
Should
know
we be
Abdul
allowing
Wahab, the
people from
ambassador,
should
who's
we be
not a
allowing
terrorist?
people?
Yes.
Should we be allowing people from Yemen in your book?
I think the case that there have been a lot of terrorists from Yemen would have it that maybe they shouldn't. But I don't remember too many terrorists coming from Laos or Togo.
No, and the reason is this is not just about terrorism. This is also about just so people understand. Getting a visa to the United States, if you're from Europe, is a simple electronic
Because they know you're
process.
going
Get
home,
it
or they
over there.
think you're going
They
home.
hope you're going home,
They
right?
hope you're going home.
But for example, for many years, Israelis had to go individually. They couldn't get an automated visa. They had to go and get a visa from the US consulate. And the reason for that was because there was a record of Israelis overstaying their visas in the United States and staying here illegally. Okay, I mean, anybody who lives in New York will say, uh-huh, that's right. And so what successive Democratic and Republican administrations said to the Israelis was, listen, we want to let you in what's called the visa waiver program so you can just apply online. But in order to do that, you're going to have to do something about the fact that there are people who are coming here, getting a visa, and then overstaying, and you are one of the worst miscreants. They worked with the Israelis, they worked with security, they worked with Israeli immigration and U.S. immigration, and they made that happen and they let them in.
Well,
Same thing,
there was
same with
also the
Poland.
issue. All right. Yeah.
Same with Poland. My point here is there's no privilege in coming to there's no right to come to America. And what the argument was in the executive order was that some of these countries, Laos is not a Muslim country, this is not a Muslim ban. Some of these countries have a record of their citizens overstaying their visas. Fair enough. You lose your rights then. Okay. I don't have any problem with that. So, again, it's a little bit more nuanced than it was. And let's face it, this is an 80-20 thing in America. Americans do not like illegal immigrants. Legal immigrants don't like illegal immigrants. I'm a legal immigrant. It's just a problem that needs to be dealt with. And part of this problem, Elise, and you and I come back to this thousands and thousands of times every time we talk, is Congress needs to pass an immigration reform bill. But of course, Congress doesn't do anything. It just takes our money and goes to work every day. That's what's necessary. We need to fix it. We don't just need to have arbitrary presidential decrees from one president to the other that swing the gates open and closed, depending on who that particular president thinks is a great guy or isn't a great guy. That's not how rule of law works. That's what the real problem is. My lecture is now over.
Danny Pletka for president.
Yes. President
Let's
of
end
Australia.
on a lighter note, maybe. A couple of articles recently. One of them was a little bit catty, if we're being honest, about Marco Rubio and the fact that he has so much power now. The last diplomat to have this much power, now that he's national security advisor, secretary of state, a handful, the national archivist, a couple of other random jobs. The last the last diplomat to have so much power really was Henry Kissinger. And so Rubio is Kissinger. What say you?
Well, these are early days. Um, Unlike some of my colleagues, I was very fond of Henry Kissinger for
I, I,
a whole
I,
series of reasons having nothing to do with Vietnam or China.
yeah, me too. Right.
Right,
It just,
exactly.
he was impressive. He was
But he
impressive.
was a very impressive and certainly an erudite man. Nobody would call Henry
And
Kissinger
working
a
till the
fool.
last day, working really till the
Let's
last day.
see. Let's see. Marco Rubio is trying really hard. I think Marco Rubio has actually taken some of the more crazy ideas that have been bounced off of him and has turned them into, and the State Department reorg is not insane. It
I
may not
agree. I
be.
agree. Jacquard Pentu. I
Jacquard
agree
is
he's
our
no Kiss.
commenter of the week.
I agree he's no Kissinger, and I'll be honest, I agree with you on the State Department reorganization. Everyone made a big deal of what it was going to be when those documents leaked. But, look, I'd like some more attention paid to democracy and human rights, and I am looking to see what the aid situation is going to be now that they folded USAID. But I think having covered the State Department for, some 20 years, I think it's pretty reasonable. When they first named Marco Rubio, I thought out of all the people it could have been, I
You were
was
happy.
actually what was kind of pleased. You know, I the jury's still out. I just don't see a lot of leadership from him right now. I think he's you know I would say the most generous thing I could say right now is that he's keeping his powder dry.
Yeah, but you know what? Kudos, actually. Keeping
Yep.
your mouth shut in this administration, keeping your powder dry, putting out a good reorg plan, working with Capitol Hill, not perfectly, frankly, but at least trying to do better than they did at the outset. Listen, I've got time for Marco Rubio at this point. I think he's doing a pretty good job. I also think a lot of my friends have been let go from the National Security Council. I will say this. We were just chatting behind the scenes because J.D. Crouch, former
Mhm.
DOD
So, yep.
official,
Yep.
former Deputy National Security Advisor, said that when George W. Bush was president, there were about 150 people on the National Security Council staff. There are 300 right now. I don't agree with who got fired and the choices that were made because I think that they fired a lot of
Yep.
meat and left a
Yep.
lot of fat.
Yep.
But that being said, 300 people on the National Security Council staff is not what is needed.
Well,
So, hey,
because the National Security Council is supposed to be a coordinating agency among the other agencies. I mean, look, if President Trump were going to give power to the other agencies, then a more streamlined National Security Council would be a good idea. Right now, I'm not
it's a
really
good
sure.
it's a good idea. Everything else needs to follow, but it is not crazy in and of itself. Hey, Elise, David Galinsky asked us both the question, and he is one of my favorite commenters. So, I am not here in Washington
I
in the summer
know.
because our beloved friend's daughter is getting married and having a destination wedding. So we're forking out bajillions to head off and celebrate her beautiful wedding and take our kids with us and have a lot of fun. And you are spending your time between New York and Washington, right?
I am, and then I'm gonna spend some time in California with my family. But we'll still be with you guys. Hot
We'll,
Takes Happy Hour
we'll
might
still be
start a
we'll
little
still be
earlier.
drinking.
Might start a little earlier on Fridays, though.
Anyway, thank you guys. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for
Thanks,
watching
everyone. Danny,
afterwards. Let
feel
us know.
better, and
Oh
we'll
my
see you
God.
next week
Hopefully with my nose recovered and
with
not
your
talking.
doze and your doge feeling much better.
And I'll try and answer the question next week about defense spending because it's a good one. We should talk about it.
Yeah.
Ciao, everybody. Bye,
Okay.
Elise.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.